The following video contains language that may be inappropriate for young viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Behind the Bars, where we bring the unseen and the unheard stories from the depths of the prison system to the forefront. I'm your host, Jason Boss, and together we'll explore the madness, the chaos, and the harsh realities hidden behind the steel doors of prisons worldwide. From the local jailhouse to death row across the world, we'll show you the isolation, the seclusion, and the decades spent enduring unimaginable conditions. These are the stories of survival, struggle, and humanity in places most of us will never see. We're here to shine a light on what society often forgets, the voices of the incarcerated. Each story is real, each voice is authentic, and every moment reveals the raw, unfiltered truth of life behind the bars. Join me for a journey like no other, a journey into the darkness, the truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. This is Behind the Bars, real life, real stories.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, thank you so much for being on this extra special podcast. This is Behind the Bars, and I am your host, Jason Boss. I have with me a very special brother who has done quite a bit of time in the Florida Department of Corrections, and he is a very amazing individual that has gotten off on the wrong foot in early parts of his life. And this is a interview that I sought after because I saw another interview that was a hit piece. It was something that I do not believe was done right. I do not believe it was done respectfully, and I don't believe the story got out correct. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my brother to you. His name is Devon Arthurs. Devin, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm blessed to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time on this, and this is going to be an incredible interview. For those who have never heard of Devon Arthurs, he is well. Let's just tell your story, brother. How long have you been in prison right now?
I've been in prison for 2 years. I've been incarcerated for 8. I picked up my charges on May 8th, 2017.
Okay, 2017. And how old are you right now?
Currently, I'm 26.
Okay. And what are the charges that you are in for?
I was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of armed kidnapping.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about early life, just kind of growing up. What was life like for you? Did you experience any kind of violence in life? What was your youth like?
Well, I grew up in a troubled home. It's the same story as a lot of people in prison. The house is not functional. My parents, they divorced at a young age, and financial stuff was difficult. House got foreclosed upon in the 2008 financial crisis when the banks took our house for the commission and stuff like that. Overall, I got involved with the wrong people when I was 14, and I was very impressionable, and people filled my hate with propaganda. They filled my head with a lot of violent tendencies and stuff like that. So, my family, they're not criminals. No one in my direct family are felons. However, they were so caught up with working, and they were so caught up with, raising my brother and taking care of, the both of us that people can fall through the cracks of supervision, and there's a lot of predators online that try to coerce people into very bad lines of thinking with the intent to have them go and do terrible things. Unfortunately, I was a child that was, taken advantage of at that young age. Okay, and you went 10th grade was the last year you did in school, correct? Yes. Okay, and you lived you've been in Florida all your life? I briefly have lived in North Carolina. I lived in the Northeast as well for a brief period of time. So I would have to say that most of my life I've lived in Florida. But, I spent entire summers of each year over in North Carolina. But overall schooling and stuff like that, yeah, pretty much Florida. Okay. And you mentioned something happened to you at 14 years old where you got involved into something. What is the name of what you were involved in? Well, I remember I started browsing forums online, Stormfront, Iron March, BNN, and stuff like that. And around 14, basically a child's brain is like a sponge. You can fill it with anything that you want. And because of lack of life experience and lack of real common sense that you develop with just living, basically they started filling my head full of neo-Nazi propaganda, and I fell for it. And unfortunately, because of that age and because I didn't realize how inappropriate that is, how violent that is, how unacceptable that is, I fell for it. It's the same exact experience that a lot of prisoners have, where at a young age, it could be an inner city gang, it could be a rural gang, it could be anything that pretty much goes and needs to have a line of new, fresh recruits that are impressionable, young, and will go and commit acts of violence for people older than them that have more experience than them, and use them essentially as foot soldiers. It's the same story that happens in war-torn countries. It's the same story that happened with Hitler Youth, and unfortunately, it happened to me, and it happens to a lot of other people convicted of crimes and serving in incarcerated communities today.
Yeah. For those who are not out there, can you explain what is a neo-Nazi, or what exactly is this?
Typically, I mean, it's people that subscribe to the teachings of National Socialism. I mean, they subscribe to the ideology of Adolf Hitler. But, I mean, it's kind of hard to give a direct definition of that, because you have groups that are satanic, like Order 9 Angles. You have groups that are Christian identity, claim to be Christian, which are, neo-Nazi Christians. You have groups that are, pagan, that have animosity towards Christianity and to, Satanism and stuff like that. So all of these different groups have different ideologies and different belief systems, but the underlying theme that they all have is that they all want to have a white ethnostate, or they want to unify white countries, or they look to the interest of trying to, so-called look for the securing the existence of a white race. But I don't think that targeting innocent people like in El Paso, or targeting innocent people in Christchurch, is really going to go and create more white people. I think this is going to murder innocent people, and in turn just kind of just spread violence and death, destruction. I mean, really, they have a pretense of saying that, you are currently under threat, they're trying to kill you, and they're doing this with the intent to try to brainwash and get people to do acts of violence so they can secure control. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's hard to say. It's not something that's a clear-cut definition. And all of these major movements, especially Atomwaffen, the Order of 9 Angles, both of them have been in the news recently. They have completely differing ideologies, but they're both neo-Nazi groups. But you can't really define them the same way.
Now, you were talking to some forums that you were going on to. Now, are these forums still in business? Are they still around? And where were they hosted at?
Well, Iron March was hosted in the Russian Federation. The guy that was the administrator of it, he gave up after my case, but he was some rich kid. His parents took advantage of the fall of the Soviet Union, so he used his money for this is Iron March, by the way, and he was using his money, living off his father's dime, who was an Uzbek, by the way. His father was an Uzbek Muslim. His mother was a Russian woman, and yet he had a website that went and promoted the genocide of people that are mixed race. So all these dudes are hypocritical on top of that, but Iron March is defunct. As far as I know, Stormfront is still around with its Web 1.0 design, and essentially a lot of these websites, they're still active, but even the ones that are interactive just get replaced by another one.
Now, say you're 14 years old, you jump on the site, do you log in with a pseudonym? Do you put your name in this, or how did you go about getting into this group, and what did that look like?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So usually people get brought into it because they'll reach out to somebody online. It'll usually start with video games or a chat room, or they'll encounter somebody that they is totally unrelated to politics, and then they pull them into a bigger circle, and then they start basically gradually giving them this almost like form of brainwashing. Like they're not going to, like, no one goes overnight from a normal kid that just wants to play Call of Duty, wants to play on his phone, talk to girls. Nobody goes overnight to being like a militant that wants to blow himself up for his cause. Like, I highly doubt that ever occurs. But how it works is that they basically coerce people just day by day, just gradually feeding them with belief systems that will turn them into a completely different person over the years. And they go and they discourage you from hanging out with your family, from hanging out with your friends. It's very cult-like in how they go in and indoctrinate people. It's very, very cult-like.
Okay, and you mentioned video games. How does that go down? How does video games end up getting you? Is it you're playing games with other people and then they invite you into this stuff? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that actually happens pretty frequently.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, almost everybody on the planet, they play video games. So, online interactions, they will be pretty much everything under the sun. So when it comes down to it, you'll have people that will, play games and stuff. They'll create whole servers on games like Counter-Strike, and it'll be ran by like a group called like Blood Flag Gaming. And somebody will join it just playing Counter-Strike, but it's ran by a bunch of Neo-Nazis. So the map itself has been altered to have swastikas, that has holes and stuff like that. And, when you're a kid, you don't think it's any other map than like, say, Call of Duty World at War. A lot of video game jargon and stuff. But the point is that it's a way that you can get access to young people and you can coerce them and you can indoctrinate them into falling into that ideology. And again, these guys are so young that they don't understand the full context, the full scope of what they're being brought into. And when they start gradually brainwashing them, they say, don't listen to your parents, don't listen to these people. Oh, that's all, like they'll have all conspiratorial belief systems. They'll start letting you think that your parents are now part of the conspiracy. Like they might be part of the movement that's trying to bring you down, trying to kill you, destroy your race, kill your brothers. And then they will go and get you so caught up with this that when you're so knee deep in that movement that you're at a point where there's no turning back. Like now it's like, oh, you want to turn back, you want to leave, now you're endangering the family you want to go back to. That's why I didn't go back to Orlando. I wanted to, but it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to there's 200 members of Adam Waffen? Am I going to go to the FBI and tell them, hey, they got explosives in the garage, they're going to use it to target synagogues, electrical substations, and try to basically target ethnic minorities and Jews and Muslims, killing men, women, and children. If I do that, they know where my family lives. I'm endangering my family. I'm stuck in a rock and a hard place. If I let them do it, now I'm charged with conspiracy and I'll get a federal prison. If I stop them, well, what am I going to do? Like you can tell the FBI, you can scream to the roof, hey, but they really, for lack of better words, they don't give a damn about all of that. People can just, I was joking online. They'll say, well, we'll keep an eye on you. But how many people do they have an eye on? How many people fall through the cracks? Like you got people that openly go on Facebook and Twitter and all these things that say blatantly, and it's not just far right, it's far left. So it's communists, anarchists, Antifa that will go and say the same exact thing. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. It's hard for them to monitor, let alone prosecute people that have malicious intent to kill innocent men, women, and children. And my actions were vindicated by the fact I warned them over. I said, you have organizations that are indoctrinating people, that are trying to go and kill innocent men, women, and children. That's exactly what happened in El Paso. That's exactly what happened in Buffalo. That's exactly what happened in Christchurch. And, I think that it really is gross negligence on part of law enforcement that they can see a freight train coming and it's about to hit a bunch of preschoolers and they don't do anything to stop it.
Now, I mean, you said there's hundreds of thousands of these guys. What's your estimate on how many groups are there? I mean, are we talking tens of thousands? Hundreds.
At least hundreds.
Hundreds.
I mean, it really depends on what you're. Again, like it's hard. Like when you ask like how what would you define what a neo-Nazi is? It's like you have prison gangs which number in the thousands. Like in Florida DOC, you have a huge number of guys that have SS poles and swastikas. But most of these dudes have never read Mein Kampf. Most of these dudes don't know who David Lane is. They don't know anything about the symbols that are on them. A lot of them are just white people that got bullied in prison so that they congregated with other whites to try to find protection. It's the same reason why black people will tend to join groups like the Blood. It's not that, people that are black or white are inherently racist or they're violent. It's just that they go and they get, they congregate based off of the sake of, I want to go home to my family, or they get a sense of belief, or this is what they were raised in. They don't know any other path. So unfortunately, it leads to this systemic problem where you have these guys that go to prison, and they basically have no rehabilitation. They don't get paid. They don't have food. But now you have a group that's offering them food, offering them protection, offering them a venue to get, a sense of brotherhood and meaning. And now basically they're just cannon fodder. Basically, they're stuck in a rock and hard place. They have the state with these incredibly difficult probationary measures that make it next to impossible to really re-enter into society, and then you have the gangs which are trying to pull them into it. So you basically have two demons pulling them in either direction.
Okay, so I had a couple questions. I want to go back to the forum side of things on this, and I was wondering if you can give some perspective to other youth around that same age as some kind of triggers or some kind of early warnings of what these guys would be saying? How do they get you in? What are the words they use?
Well, they usually, I mean, nobody really goes and just says, hey, you want to join a militia, or hey, you want to come to Ukraine and come fight with the Azov battalion. You know, it's like they don't necessarily say that. It's a gradual transition, and usually it starts with, you know, common interests. So you'll find somebody that you play video games with, or you find somebody that's actively playing these games to coerce and recruit people, or they go on forums with the intent to go and proliferate ideology. And with the internet, the overwhelming majority of users are what you call lurkers, and lurkers do not post content. And ideology, so this ranges from groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, to you know, Neo-Nazis and communists. You know, a wide spectrum of radical movements. They understand that whoever controls basically, like, they don't make up the majority, but if they have a megacom, or if they have some kind of, you know, radio tower, you might have one guy saying stuff, but it creates a very loud minority. It creates a very, very loud way of getting their point across, even if it's, you know, not a popular belief system.
Now, you mentioned Brotherhood. You know, how long was it since when you were in your forums did you feel a connection to a recruiter or to somebody who was actively trying to get you in? How long was that?
That was within about a year. And, you know, in high school I was able to find other kids with similar, you know, belief systems, and, you know, we would hang out and stuff. And, you know, it wasn't anywhere near to the same extent, but when I started hanging out with Brandon, and when I started hanging out with other members of Atomwaffen, the group that I was in, basically that led to me getting really pulled down the rabbit hole, if you will. And, you know, when you're at that age, you know, every kid, you know, people, it might sound strange, but, you know, it makes sense to both of us, but it's like, you know, every boy really likes guns, you know, in America. Like, I'll just say it, like a lot of kids, they play Call of Duty, they play Halo, they watch for action movies. So, you know, when you get to shoot guns, and everybody likes money, and when you have money, when you're at that age, you think $500 might as well be $1 million. So when you're selling guns, and you're shooting guns, and you're hanging out, and you're going and doing this, that, or the other, you know, you're really not living a high life at all. You're not really you're not Billy Badass. You know, you're just basically you think that it's all that, but you don't have enough life experience to differentiate that this really is not a sustainable way of living. This is very self-destructive path, and that's why you're not going to typically find people which are, you know, your 9-to-5, 30-year-old, 401k, HSA holding people that join gangs, or let alone go to prison. Like, you're just not going to find people from stable homes and from stable backgrounds get pulled into movements like that.
Right. And so you mentioned two things. The guy's name that I guess was your main recruiter, his name was Brandon or Brannon?
He was the leader of the organization, Brandon Clint Russell, and he ended up actually last week, he caught 45 years in the feds because he tried to blow up electrical facilities with the intent to cut power to hospitals and critical infrastructure. In his mind, this was 2 years ago, in his mind he believed that if he cut power to the city of Baltimore, never mind that it's going to cause people to die from losing their ventilators in their home, and it's going to possibly harm, you know, children if, you know, infirmaries lose power. You know, what if the power surge or power cascading failure destroys the reserve power for a hospital, for example? Never mind all that. He was so hell-bent on trying to cause a race war that he was willing to jeopardize millions of people in that city and surrounding areas. So he tried to work with his co-defendants to target all that, and I warned them about this about 8 years ago. You see, he did 5 years for a previous charge of the explosives that he owned in the garage of my crime scene. And what happened was that he ended up getting prosecuted. He got 45 years for that. That was about last week.
Okay, and you obviously met this guy. Was he active in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've lived with him before. He's, you know, somebody that I knew very, very, very well, and that was somebody that was like mentoring me and pushing me into a lot of those activities. So, you know, he was teaching me things like denial of service attacks, you know, taking down people's websites, taking down critical infrastructure in eastern Ukraine. They might be doing inspection here in a moment, but I think we got time. Anyway, but yeah, so critical infrastructure and stuff like that was something that he wanted to target. They believe that by accelerating the collapse of the United States government and the Western world, that'll create a vacuum of power, which will allow them to seize power at that point and form the state that they want. And of course, the state would result with the deaths of millions of innocent people, men, women, and children. they herald people ranging from Charles Manson. He was somebody that was a very big fan of Charles Manson. He was somebody who was a very big fan of the Columbine shooters. He was somebody that would, blatantly, talk about how much he wanted to shoot synagogues. I remember when I knew I was kidnapped in that movement, I was at his house where he got arrested at Marabou Circle for the current charge he just got convicted on. And we're cleaning our SKSs. SKS is like a Russian semi-automatic rifle. So what happens is that he's talking about, I want to kill the Jews. I want to kill, I'm not using the terminology that he used. He used a, derogatory word for that. But, and I go, I'm just agreeing with him because, I'm a sponge. I'm just taking what he says and I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. Then he says, I want to kill their kids too. Kill all of them. I said, I don't think I can kill a baby. I don't think I can kill a kid, Brandon. And he looked at me dead in the eyes and he said, you're going to do exactly what I tell you to do. And if you try to stop me, I will F you up. I'm trying to watch my language, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's
down to it.
Yeah.
Kidnapped into that movement, and that was when I was around 17. Excuse me, I was 16. I converted to a new faith, a few months after that, and that was when I completely, renounced that whole movement.
So
these are people that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So at 16, how old was this dude, Brandon?
He was about 21 at that point. 21,
and who was his mentor? Did he have a?
That's a good question. He basically was, he told me that he hadn't been, like he tell me, I've always had these belief systems. That's a blatant lie. His family doesn't have any of those belief systems. His grandfather's a detective in the Bahamas. His mother was somebody that flew Cessna planes. So these were very, 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 successful Bahamian Americans. But he picked up this ideology from too much exposure to these forums at a young age. So, nobody ever wakes up just having these belief systems, like I said. Mm-hmm. So he was coerced and manipulated by, videos ranging from, YouTube videos talking about the National Alliance, talking about race war. He was always fixated on military history. So he had a fixation on World War II. Of course, World War II involves the Nazis, so he would just study and study and study. And he was very fixated. He had a very, very he had a almost messianic complex about how he was going to save what he called the white race, or at least the Aryan race, whatever that means. Because Aryans live in Iran, and I don't think that many people consider Iran. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
it is what it is. Like,
so Jews are white, though, right? I mean, why would he want to take?
That's the thing. Me and him, ironically, along with Hitler, are all part Jewish. So all of them are hypocritical from the start. Almost all these dudes have secret black girlfriends, secret Hispanic girlfriends and stuff. So they're all hypocritical. I'll go hang the white woman for getting with the black guy, but I hope nobody finds out that I'm on Tinder talking to this, that, or the other. So they're all hypocrites, and they were all and they were to answer your question about that though, Jews are Semitic people. Me myself, I'm half Jewish, but ethnically, I don't subscribe to the Jewish faith. I have nothing wrong with Jewish people. I have nothing wrong with the Jewish religion. I've met some fantastic Jewish people. I was part of a Jewish Boy Scout troop at a young age, but I felt alienated because at the time I was not a practicing Jew. So, I never really understood to the greatest extent who they are, and until I started reading up on my own family history and reading into their faith, which I believe is a beautiful religion. I believe that there are plenty of good people that, are subscribed to the Jewish faith. So I want to make it clear I'm not an anti-Semite.
Yeah,
but Semitic peoples are not European. They come from the Middle East. They don't really identify as being white. A lot of Arabs and Jews are related to each other because they come from the line of Abraham. Abraham, of course, was an Iraqi and so forth. Personally, I don't believe that there's such thing as white or black. I believe that there are certainly cultural differences with human beings, but I believe that these are social constructs for the sake of dividing people, for the sake of really, causing people to come up with identities. I mean, nobody identifies as a Sumerian or Hittite or an Akkadian anymore.
Right.
These ideologies come and go. These identities change and morph. And, nobody, the other half I'm Irish. Irish people were not considered white and say 150 years ago. Irish need not apply. The Italians weren't either. The largest lynching that ever occurred in American history, I believe, I've read this, was against Italian Americans. So suddenly these people are quote-unquote white, but it's an ever-changing ideology and definition. So that same question, are Jews white? That can be applied to Irish, Italians, Polish people, etc. I mean, Hitler didn't even view the Slavic peoples of Eastern Europe as being Aryan. He viewed them as untermenschen, and he used millions of Polish people for slavery purposes of pushing the German war machine. So he didn't even view half of Europe as being white.
Okay, yeah, that's the thing I still can't wrap my head around. I mean, I guess if being a neo-Nazi is trying to, like, protect a skin color or something of the sort, but yet there's all these white folks or something that they're still attacking. What qualifies as, how would you take a lineup of 10 people and say, okay, and they're all white? How would you say, half of them, these are obviously people that are not there? I mean, how did they figure this out? What does that mean?
Well, my bunkie, he's a Cuban, but at first glance you would assume that he's just a white American, but he doesn't identify as white. You have Tajikistanis and Iranians that are blonde hair, blue eyes. You have tons of Lebanese people. The mosque I used to go to that was Palestinian and Egyptian, people there would walk up to, this is before I spoke a lot of Arabic, but they walk up to me speaking Arabic, assuming that I was a Palestinian. And the point is that there are plenty of people with that phenotype that exist in countries we would declare as non-white, quote unquote, but it doesn't make sense. There's Lebanese people, there's people that are Iranian people, you have German people, sure, but a house that's built on a poor foundation will not stand. And National Socialism as an ideology, when it started, had nothing to do with white nationalism. If people actually read Mein Kampf, he was not looking to the interests of American white people. He was looking to Germanic nationalism. He did not view the French as being his kinsmen. He didn't view the Italians as being his kinsmen. In fact, who was he allied with? Referring to Hitler, he's allied with the Japanese Empire, and the Japanese killed 600,000 Marines, most of which were of European origin, i.e. would be declared white Americans. So if people actually looked into their ideology, they would find out that it's a house of cards in the United States. There's propaganda the Nazis had by Goebbels' ministry propaganda that would mock the Ku Klux Klan. So when you find Klansmen that have SS bolts and swastikas, they don't understand that these two groups had animosity to each other. The Ku Klux Klan hated Italians with a burning passion, hated Catholics with a burning passion. However, Hitler himself was a self-declared Catholic. Italy was an ally of Hitler. Mussolini was the one that gave the Vatican City independence. So that's kind of the irony of the whole thing. It falls apart as soon as somebody scratches the surface with any common sense and common background in history. This is fascinating. This is absolutely one of the most fascinating interviews I think I've ever had. Now, going back, I want to touch on a quick thing. You said that the Brandon Clint Russell was trying to blow up a hospital and trying to destabilize America for a power grab. In their minds, or in the minds of these groups, how would they grab power with being such a small minority? Well, essentially the same way that ISIS does. I mean, they just basically, their idea was, he would watch ISIS videos and Al-Qaeda videos not because he agreed with the ideology, but because he would look at them as an inspiration of, I want to apply this over here. I want to basically go and have an insurgency over here. Okay. Now, we're almost down to our last minute here, and I try to keep these at. For the last minutes that we have here, can you give some youngsters some inspiration on how not to get where you got? What can they do right now to stop what they are doing to go the right direction? I got to say, just off the top of my head, stay in school. Look to the best interest of your family. Look to the best interest of your career. Go and find healthy ways of living. Try to question. If somebody...
You have 1 minute remaining.
If somebody comes to you with an ideology or a belief system or anything really, take it with a grain of salt. Do your own investigation. Don't just go and believe it. I know that we're told in school, everybody that's older than you, trust them. Like that's an adult, but question it. Go to, do your own research and everything. That's make sure that you look to your best interest. Don't let anybody, don't fight another man's war if it's going to get you killed and it doesn't serve anybody interest except for somebody that's trying to manipulate you. Don't end up dead in Ukraine fighting for the Azov Battalion. Don't end up like a lot of Adam Waffen guys did. All right. Anyway, I want to let you know that it's been a great interview. This has been a great opportunity, and I greatly appreciate this, man.
All right, absolutely. And everybody, thank you. This is Devon Arthurs, Behind the Bars. I'm Jason Boss.
If anybody wants to reach out to me, I love pen pals. Anybody can reach out to me on my JPay or my Purist, whatever. If anybody wants to email me.
Okay, link is in the bottom, guys. You can get a hold of Devin.